إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد. I think as we're all aware, the blessed month of Ramadan is exactly 1 month away. We ask Allah to bless us in this month and allow us to reach the next month of Ramadan. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. When it comes to anything of significance in this life, when it comes to anything of significance in dunya, whether it's an exam, someone's trying to get licensed, or whatever it may be, if you think of any analogy, whenever there's something of importance, we always prepare for it, as we should. The idea that I want us to reflect on, though, is just as we prepare for dunya, for the finite, for the few moments we have in this life, how much are we preparing for the infinite? How much are we preparing for the next life? How much do we think about our affairs in connection with dunya? How much do we think about our affairs in connection with akhirah? The beauty of Islam is Islam teaches us how to balance both. Islam doesn't teach us to operate in one extreme or the other, but it gives us this perfect and beautiful balance. When you look at Surah Al-Baqarah, in one ayah, Allah actually criticizes those who ask Him for dunya. It's very interesting when you think about it. They're asking Allah alone, but they're only asking for dunya. Their only concern is dunya. The only thing on their minds and in their hearts is this life. Allah actually criticizes that mentality. Allah criticizes the condition of that type of heart. They say, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَقٍ. They ask Allah for dunya, but Allah says for them in the hereafter, in the next life, there's nothing for them. And then Allah contrasts that with the very next ayah, and Allah mentions, and there are other people who say, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. There's a very stark contrast between these two types of people and personalities, two very different internal conditions. One is asking Allah only for dunya. Notice the nuances and the details though. There's so much beauty in the Quran, and there's so much beauty when you zoom out and you look at it from a bird's eye view, and there's so much beauty when you zoom in and you look at the very specific, intricate details. Regarding dunya, those who are only overly consumed with this life, there's no mention of the word hasan. There's no mention of the concept of blessing. There's no mention of Allah being tethered to their efforts regarding dunya. They just want dunya as much as they can get their hands on. This attitude is actually satanic in nature. It goes back to Iblis himself. What did he ask Allah for when he refuses to bow to Adam alayhi salam? He asked Allah to give him respite until the day of judgment. Think about it deeply. He wants as much dunya as he can get. Allow me to live so long as this world is in existence. So Allah says, okay. Allah gives that to him. If someone has this attitude where they're only and primarily focused on this life and they completely ignore the next life, Allah is criticizing the condition of that type of heart. And then Allah praises, so you have the compare and the contrast. And then Allah praises those. They still ask Allah for dunya, but they connect it with hasan. They connect it with His blessing. They connect it with a bigger understanding of things they're going to have to do for their dunya anyways. They're going to have to work that 9 to 5 anyways. They're going to have to try their best to make the most of their situation anyways. But the mentality of this person is, even when it comes to what's tangibly in front of me, I connect it with forever. That's on the other side of that line, so to speak. As soon as someone passes away, they transition from this life into the next. The attitude of this person is, yes, they understand the time and the place of checking the boxes of their dunya. Everyone still has bills to pay. But that's not the primary reason why they're existing. Not in reality and not in their mentality. They understand that I'm doing this because, yes, I may have to, but I'm going to connect it with my relationship with Allah. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنًا. So they still ask Allah for dunya, but they need whatever portion of dunya that Allah gives them, whatever slice of this life that Allah gives them. More importantly than having it, they need it to be blessed by Allah. How many people, they may have a huge mansion, they may have this incredible house, but it's not a home. No one in there talks to each other. No one in there likes each other. No one in there loves each other. It's a cold, big house, but it's not a home. When we're asking Allah for dunya, we have to connect it with hasana. Ya Allah, I really need this job opportunity. Help me with this interview. I hope it's good for me. That's what istikhara is. You have a job opportunity. You're applying to get into one school or another. You're doing your part. You have to tether your effort with istikhara. You do your part. You have to do your part, but you also understand, even if this opportunity looks like it's a good opportunity, Ya Allah, I'm turning to you because I don't know what's behind the scenes. I don't know the reality behind closed doors. I don't know what the reality is going to be in 6 months. For example. So they turn to Allah because of their iman. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنًا. It doesn't stop there though. That's only 1/3. وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنًا وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. So they ask Allah for the good of this life and the good of the next life, and they ask Allah for protection from the fire. There are 3 elements to this dua. Only 1/3 is regarding dunya. Even if it's tethered with taqwa, even if it's tethered with Allah making that something blessed. If the brothers can please scoot forward. Even then, as you navigate your dunya with taqwa, there's an understanding that that's only a fraction of the picture. It's a minority, it's not the majority. The majority of the dua is in connection with akhirah. 1/3 is allocated for this life, and then 2/3 are allocated for the next life. So when I'm making dua, what am I asking Allah for in general? How am I asking Allah? What am I asking Allah for? No one is saying that we shouldn't ask Allah for help with our work, with our school, with our family, we should. But we also need to think of the bigger picture. What about the next life? What am I preparing for the infinite? And then what am I preparing for the finite? Which one is taking up the majority of my heart space, my head space? 1/3 is for this life, and then 2/3 is for the next life. As we approach the blessed month of Ramadan, the month of Quran, I want to encourage myself and everyone here to do what we can to prepare from now. Our scholars have given this beautiful analogy. The month of Rajab, so 2 months before Ramadan, is when you plant the seeds. The month of Sha'ban, which today is the first day of, that's when you focus on the watering of those seeds. You focus on the cultivation. And then when it comes to Ramadan, that's when the harvest is. That's when you benefit from the efforts that you put in to prepare for it. We prepare for things in this life as we should. But we also need to make sure that we're preparing for the next life. It's a one-way ticket. When someone transitions from this life to the next, there's no coming back. When you comb through the Quran from now, don't wait till Ramadan to pick up the Quran, or to listen to the Quran, or to connect with it. Connect with it from now. Every little bit matters. If someone came to you and said, I'm going to give you a brick of gold today, but it's only one brick, no one is going to complain. MashaAllah, that's amazing. One ayah of Quran, one verse of Quran is worth more than one brick of gold. So if someone has this understanding, you know what, I'm going to connect with one ayah every day. And I'm going to chew on it. I'm going to taste the sweetness of it. And I'm going to digest it. I'm going to process it, reflect on it. And I'm going to try to live it responsibly within my capacity. That's how the Quran has to be approached. There's good, no question, in more than one ayah per day. But the point is, if you do something small but consistent, the Prophet praised this type of practice, this type of mentality. He didn't just say that it's good if someone does something consistently. He said the deeds most beloved to Allah Azza wa Jal are those that are done consistently, even if they're small. The Prophet is teaching us, think long term. If you start a habit today, try to keep it going for 10 years, for example. When you look at it in that way, okay, I think I can commit to one ayah there. I think that's realistic for me. If I want to maintain this for 10 years, let me reflect on that and make a decision in connection with that practice, that habit, thinking potentially a decade into the future. That's the idea of the approach. Let me plant a seed now and then consistently water it. If a person takes the ayah in the Quran, the one ayah that mentions a specific month by name, and that specific month that's mentioned by name is none other than the month of Ramadan. What is the month of Ramadan primarily tethered with? With the Quran. But what should the outcome be of diving into the Quran consistently throughout the month of Ramadan? Allah mentions it in the same ayah. What should the outcome be? How do you know if you had a successful Ramadan or not? What's the litmus test? Allah gives it to us. Allah mentions three primary outcomes. وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةِ وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Number one, to complete the number of days. Number two, to praise Allah, to thank Allah for what He has guided us to in terms of Islam, in terms of the Quran. But what's the capstone to this very special and unique ayah? وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. And so you may be grateful. Let me reflect internally, how is my heart doing in connection with this concept of gratitude before the month of gratitude, before the month of Ramadan, before the month of the Quran. Let me reflect, how am I doing in connection with this concept of gratitude? Gratitude, just like patience, it's one of those things that's very easy to say, very hard to do. We all understand that. But Allah is giving us this encouragement, this nudge, over and over throughout the Quran. If you're grateful, I'll give you more. Remember me, and I'll remember you. Give a little, and I'll give you more in return. You notice something. It's very subtle, but you'll notice something as you come through the Quran. Step one, part one of that process, of that formula of change, of transformation, of growth, it starts within the individual. I have to take that first step towards Allah. I have to do my part first. If I'm grateful, then Allah will open doors. If I remember Allah, then He'll remember me. My remembrance of Him is a reflection of me. Like how tiny am I, and how limited am I in my capacity? I'm this little grain of sand in the universe. But if Allah Himself remembers me, this tiny speck in the universe, that's a reflection of Allah's grace, Allah's mercy, Allah's generosity. So on and so forth. So who's benefiting from that dynamic? It's 100% us. Allah doesn't gain or lose anything whether we remember Him or not. But Allah is giving us these recipes for our own benefit. People often think that I'm going to become happy first and then I'll become grateful. That's backwards. You become grateful first, then you become happy. Then you become content. Then you become more aware of the blessings Allah has already provided you and me. Gratitude doesn't negate that people have challenges. Look at the example of the Blessed Prophet ﷺ. Look at these immense challenges that he went through, ﷺ. Over and over and over and over. Yet you find him the most grateful of people. Yet you find him the most generous of people. Yet you find him always smiling. You find him always being kind and thoughtful and generous and compassionate. There are so many examples of this. If I truly love the Prophet ﷺ, let me try to follow in his footsteps as best I can. Let me take that first step. I have to walk towards Allah, and then Allah will hasten towards me. The brothers can please stood up. If you can make room for others, Allah will make room for you in paradise, inshallah. As I prepare for the month of Ramadan, the main way to prepare is with the Quran, is through the Quran. And how do I know if I'm truly benefiting from the Quran? How is my gratitude in terms of my heart, in terms of my words, in terms of my actions? There's one specific action the Prophet highlighted, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he said, this is proof. In the longer version of the hadith, the Prophet, he mentions that prayer is light. He mentions that patience, sabr, resilience, grit, it's more than patience. Think of it as like an active patience. You're actively pushing through whatever it is you're going through. He described that as, he used a different word. For salah, he mentioned nur, which is light without heat, like the moon. But then for patience, for grit, for resilience, for sabr, he said this, as-sabru diya. Diya is not just light, it's light and heat, like the sun. But what's the third thing he mentioned in this hadith? As-sadaqatu burhan, that charity is proof. When you comb through the life of the Prophet ﷺ, look at how he encourages people when it comes to sadaqah. Look at how he describes it. Look at how he himself lives it and interacts with it himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's not only preaching, he would always practice what he preached, alayhi salatu wasalam. He would always live his words. So he wasn't just telling people, go and do this, go and do... No, he was living it first 1,000 times over before he mentioned it to anyone else, alayhi salatu wasalam. He himself mentioned as-sadaqatu burhan, that charity is proof. When it came to the month of Ramadan, what was the primary impact that it had on Nabi himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He was spending more time with the Quran, more time with his Quran teacher, Jibreel alayhi salam, Prophet, Angel Gabriel. What was the result of that? His community described him. They said that he was already the most generous of people, but in Ramadan, he would become even more generous. Meaning, the deeper someone connects with the Quran, it should reflect in your character, especially when it comes to generosity. Let me prepare my heart for the month of Quran from now, with the Quran in theory, in terms of reading, listening, reviewing, memorizing, etc., but also in practice. And what is the primary way that the Prophet lived the Quran? By giving. Allah tells the family of David, Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, to do acts of gratitude. And then what does Allah say? Very few people actually do this. Very few people are actually grateful. May Allah make us all from among the few. May Allah make us all from among the grateful with our hearts, with our words, and with our actions. And we Rabbil Alameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. a dua request for Sister Isra Hussein, who passed away in the plane crash. We ask Allah to forgive her. We ask Allah to have mercy on her. We ask Allah to make the challenge easy, relatively speaking, for her loved ones, for her friends and her family. I'm here today on behalf of Ihsan Foundation for West Africa. We have a table set up outside, and the specific project that your support is sought for. And the beautiful thing about our deen, the beautiful thing about Allah being Allah, Allah doesn't look first at the quantity of anything. Allah looks first at the quality of the intention, and then if it makes it through that filter, then the quantity is looked at, but it's always secondary. It's always secondary. What's primary is always the quality of the niyyah, the quality of the intention. Our Prophet taught us, ﷺ, that there's a situation, there was an incident that happened before his time, ﷺ, when there was someone, they gave water to a dog. And because of that, Allah forgave them and had mercy on them and granted them Jannah. From the perspective of quantity, it's very little. It wasn't in a fancy golden goblet. It wasn't Zamzam water. It was nothing to write home about from the human perspective. But from Allah's perspective, this person did something sincerely. Albeit small, Allah accepted it and granted them Jannah. If you were to quantify it from today's perspective, maybe that water would be, maybe it would be sold for like 50 cents for $1. And it's not even in a plastic bottle. It's in their shoe, and they were just wearing that shoe, and it wasn't perfect, and it was something small, but it was sincere. That's what our deen goes back to. Sayyidina Abu Bakr gave a huge amount, but it was sincere. Sayyidina Umar, sincerity. Sayyidina Uthman, sincerity. Look up any example of the Sahaba. Yes, you have differences in terms of how much people may have given, but the core of any of those acts was sincerity. The specific project that your support is humbly sought for in West Africa is for a school that Ihsan is building. It's basically a middle school, a high school, and the college is going to provide education, both the secular sciences and the sacred sciences. The reality is, forget the secular sciences for a second. The sacred sciences, Quran, Hadith, Seerah, Deen, in all of its beautiful shapes and forms and sciences, if we don't support them to learn about their Deen, other people will teach them about their Deen, and for the sake of survival, a lot of people may drift in that direction. I say this subjectively with no judgment towards anyone, but the point is it's an opportunity. If we step in to help preserve their Deen, Allah will help me preserve my Deen. If I give to help someone else's children with their Deen, Allah will help my children, my grandchildren, with their Deen. Again, that formula, that process begins with us first. We have to do our part first, and then Allah will reciprocate and will give so much more to us in return. We ask Allah for His guidance. We ask Allah for His forgiveness. We ask Allah for His protection. We ask Allah for the best of this life and the next, and protection from the fire. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. We ask Allah to fill our hearts with love for Him and His messenger and for His book. We ask Allah to make it easy for us to follow in the footsteps of our beloved Prophet ﷺ. We ask Allah to help us to learn more about Him, to love Him more, and to live more like Him as best we can within our capacity. We ask Allah to fill our hearts with the Quran from now. We ask Allah to help us to learn it and to live it as best we can. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. We ask Allah to fill our homes with joy, peace, and happiness. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَّسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا رَبَّنَا وَلَا تَحْمِلْ عَلَيْنَا إِصْرًا كَمَا حَمَلْتَهُ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِنَا رَبَّنَا وَلَا تُحَمِّلْنَا مَا لَا طَاقَةَ لَنَا بِهِ وَاعْفُ عَنَّا وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا وَارْحَمْنَا أَنْتَ مَوْلَانَا فَانصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. هيا على الصلاة هيا على